for joining us for another what we're kind of positioning as a micro webinar. We wanted to do some quick hit informational sessions about some of the really important digital marketing practices that are going to help your organization create more impact. So this what we're going to dive in today is media buying and how to do that smartly, how to be able to scale your media buying, whether you're spending lots of money on paid advertising or you're just getting started. We're going to walk through some media cost best practices of how we help organizations scale up their outreach. Just a quick kind of bit of housekeeping. If there's questions that come up during the webinar, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter. We're at MediaCause. We've got our marketing teams waiting by to answer any questions you might have on Twitter. And as Dan mentioned, the presentation will be available after. So if we're moving quick, so if there's questions that come up maybe tomorrow or next week, you'll have the contact information so you can reach back out. So with that, I'm going to dive right in. We've got a lot to cover. So a little bit about who we are. So I am the president of MediaCause. We are an organization that works with nonprofit and other social impact organizations with digital communications, whether that's marketing or fundraising or awareness or helping folks build their digital presence from the ground up, or helping big organizations scale into specific platforms or creative areas. So we're a national organization. I actually am here in Boston, so good afternoon to everyone on the East Coast, and our headquarters out in San Francisco. If there's folks out there on the West Coast, good morning to you. And then we also have offices in DC and Atlanta. But enough about us. Let's dive right in. So what is digital media buying? So media buying is essentially when we go and we purchase ads on Facebook, Twitter, Google, programmatic tools like Quantcast, display networks. There's so many different ways in which we can buy media. As I'm sure a lot of you have experienced over the last few months, in particular on Facebook, as algorithms change, media buying has become almost a necessity for any nonprofit organization, any social impact organization looking to reach audiences. These platforms have really become more of pay to play. So being able to have some really good tactical execution and some bigger strategic thoughts around digital media buying is going to be really important. And why? Basically to make sure we're not wasting money, right? We don't want to spend money on ad platforms or ad units or particular campaigns if we're not going to be doing it effectively. So what we're going to walk through today is some really top level ideas and concepts that are going to help everyone that's joining us be essentially better media buyers. So media buying has really shifted in the last 10 years as these platforms have become where a lot of organizations, even outside the nonprofit world, are parking money. They have become platforms that it's no longer a necessity to have a planner and a buyer and a creative team. A lot of that, particularly in the nonprofit world, can be accomplished in more of a do-it-yourself fashion. So many of these platforms, whether it's Facebook or Twitter and Snapchat, just rolled out their own self-service model. So what does that mean? It basically means that you don't need anything more than a credit card and some skills to go out and launch an ad campaign. We do caution against essentially just going out and buying media just to buy media. Why? Because we want to make sure that, one, we've got some really specific goals we want to accomplish, but two, we really know who our audience is. There's a lot of different platforms out there. We're going to talk about some of them, but I think right from the beginning, I think one of the big takeaways is that you as an individual working at an organization, working at a nonprofit, working at an agency, have the ability to go out and actually put ads out live 5 minutes from now. And that's a big shift in how digital media has transitioned and has allowed us to be able to all of us to be advertisers. So a little bit about our process and what we go through to create really effective ad units, to create really effective campaigns through digital media buying. It all starts with discovery and planning, and it's, for us, it's really not rocket science. It's going and doing some research before you turn any ads live, before you even think about creating ads. Is going in and understanding your audiences, understanding what messaging you put out previously has worked, right? You want to scale up what works and reduce what doesn't work. Understand what platforms are going to work best for your audience. If you're trying to target, a younger demographic, Facebook actually may not be the best place for you. If you're trying to target an older demographic, maybe it's Facebook, and don't worry about doing ad units on Snapchat, right? So all these different platforms also have some specific audiences that they cater to, and also different types of content, right? If you don't have any video content, it definitely shouldn't be thinking about rolling out, any advertising units on YouTube, or being able to take advantage of Facebook's video ad units, right? So we go through that process first. We don't select an ad platform and then try to figure out how to make it work. We really want to understand who our audiences are, and what we have for resources before we dive into creating any type of media buying plan. So this is a really, really important part of it, is understanding how you're going to measure success. And we come across it quite a bit at Media Cause when we first start working with organizations, where understanding what success means isn't highly defined, and that's a big mistake, right? Because you're out there spending money on ad units, whether you're spending $5,000 on Facebook or $20,000 on Google. Having the ability to measure and understand what success means needs to be defined at the beginning of a campaign before you ever turn an ad unit live. So here's a quick top level kind of KPI matrix to think about, right? At the top, you've got brand awareness, just getting your organization out in front of people. How do you measure if that's working? Well, the typical ways that you're looking at impressions, you're looking at unique reach, how many individuals you actually got in front of, how many unique people clicked on an ad, how many people from that ad got to a landing page, how many people viewed a video. These are all very top of the funnel KPIs. As we start narrowing down and start looking at how our media buying was more effective, we start looking at things like lead generation, emails captured, how much did it cost for every email that we captured. So we're removing this notion of like it's just about eyeballs and impressions, and getting into the tangible of what's really valuable for your organization, right? Building your list, being able to add more people to your email list, or getting people to take some type of action. And then further along, the downstream is, did we get donations? What were the total amount of donations? What was that cost per donation made as it relates to the very top of the funnel, right? So this shifts for every organization, right? This particular KPI viewpoint is for donations, but your organization may not be doing individual giving. You may be more focused on the advocacy side of things, or more focused on specific programmatic goals. Maybe it's recruitment. We do a lot of work with organizations that are trying to recruit teachers or students, and maybe that's what the downstream goal is. But it's establishing what those KPIs are going to be at the beginning is really, really important. So the third step that's directly related to KPIs is setting goals. What are we looking to accomplish? And in some instances, you may actually not have those goals there. So maybe this first campaign is really around establishing benchmarks, understanding where the organization is right now. It cost us, $2 to collect an email, or it cost us $70 to get a new donor. Understanding what those numbers are really, really important, because then you can start to understand how effective your campaign is the next time you run it, the next campaign you run, right? So if you don't have benchmarks to set goals off of, I would encourage folks to run campaigns that are specifically there to establish benchmarks, right? You got to start somewhere. And then hopefully what you're doing and gaining some knowledge through this webinar is how to reduce those costs, how to pick platforms better, how to understand audience, and making sure that dynamic is part of your process, right? Because then you can start to reduce those costs. The second part of this, after goals, is budget. It's being really realistic about what you have to spend before you jump out on a specific platform. Again, not all platforms are created equal. Yeah, you can jump onto Facebook and spend $100, or you can jump on and spend 100,000. But some platforms actually have minimum buys in which you need to be aware of. So you may not be able to take full advantage of all the ad networks out there. So understand goals, understand budget, really, really important. We use this framework called SMART goals, making those goals specific, making them measurable, being realistic about what you're going to be able to attain, also being realistic about what the campaign's objective is. And the last part is just being timely, being able to make sure that we're not being unrealistic about the length of a campaign based off of our budget. If we have a $5,000 budget, we may not be able to run a campaign for 2 months. So we've set our KPIs, we set our goals, we've got our budget in place. We did some discovery work to understand our audiences. So now we're really going to be looking at which platforms are best for me to do this media buy. As I mentioned, not all of them are created equal. Different platforms attract different audiences. Different platforms have different targeting capabilities. I think we've all been reading in the news how Facebook's targeting capabilities are pretty significant, and that's something to think about. If you're looking for a specific type of user, is it based off of demographic information? Is it location and age and gender? Or is what they're searching for more important? That they're searching something in Google, so we need to use more of a search-based media buying strategy where we want to identify people who are searching for certain types of keywords, as opposed to getting an ad unit in front of someone who fits a certain type of persona profile, right? So all these platforms are geared differently. It's also just thinking about why people use these platforms, and we always just like to do the common sense test, right? Like LinkedIn, is a great platform for targeting people with content that's related to their career, toward maybe shifting careers, maybe getting involved in some type of volunteer opportunities or board level opportunities. That's going to be a more effective platform than trying to reach those folks on Instagram, where it's going to be a lot more personal, where it's people's hobbies and interests are what takes up their time and why they're on Instagram. So it's also thinking about that. We mentioned, you see on the slide right now, we've got AdWords and YouTube and Facebook. Like, these are the biggies that we typically use across the board with most of our clients, but there is an infinite amount of ad networks, ad publishers out there to use. These are the ones where we typically find for nonprofit organizations are the best bang for their buck, because they just have the most audience there. And typically where you have more audience, you have more data to be able to target people more effectively and more cost efficiently. All right, so we've gotten to the part where we have planned out our media buying. We know who our audiences are, our audience is. We know what platforms we want to use. We've established some KPIs. We've got some goals in place. So now it's about actually building out the campaign, right? So the first thing to do is gathering content, right? I think there's a couple ways to think about this. It's either you have great content already that you're going to be able to leverage on a certain type of platform, like I mentioned, YouTube. Video does really great on Facebook as well. So if you have that great content already, it's thinking about how do we use that content and curate it for the purposes of the campaign. Another way to look at it is you may have identified a platform that is is really important to your audience, and that you're going to be able to find your audience, but you may not have the content, so you got to create instead of curate there. So maybe about going out and making and creating some really compelling content that is going to be able to be leveraged on that platform. So you select visuals, you select the messaging. Every platform is going to have kind of different requirements in terms of building out particular ad units. We put a fun one in here for one of the organizations that we work with called Hero Rats. These are literally rats that can sniff out landmines, and they're so lightweight that they actually don't explode the landmine. So no rats got hurt in this process. So we ran a campaign during year ends, traditional fundraising season, and we used an ad unit on Facebook that allowed us to create an image, create a really urgent call to action, and then you guys can see that Facebook actually has the opportunity to create a button that allows folks to donate right there, right? So again, that type of ad unit isn't available on all platforms. So it's really understanding what your goal is, understanding who your audience is and what content you have, and then you just start putting all these things together. You start bringing the content in, bringing in the messaging, bringing in the call to action that's going to be most relevant. Another part of this is also not being afraid to test out different messaging. I think one of the real advantages of digital as opposed to more traditional mediums like print or radio or TV is that you get a lot of options to create different variants. So what do I mean by that? You don't have to create one ad unit. You can create 100 ad units. And turn them live and see which one works best. Obviously, there's some budget issues there. If you have a small budget, you're not going to want to create 100 different ad units, but 2, 3, 4, up to 10 may be really effective, because essentially what you can do is you let the market decide which messaging is best. You let the market decide which image worked best. We always have our gut, we always have our instincts as to what we think will work best. But I think this is where these platforms produce such great data, use the data to be able to determine what works. And sometimes it's the one you least expect that's going to work the best. But again, that's the beauty of digital. You can turn on and off different ad units very quickly. So this is where we see a lot of folks get tripped up. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about this, because I think ultimately this is the most important part. Is being able to measure effectiveness, to be able to understand that if you're spending real money, right? This is outside of the Google ad grant program, the Google for Nonprofit program, where you're spending Google dollars. If you're doing any other type of media buying, you're using real money. So you want to be able to make sure that you're being effective stewards of that money. Making sure that tracking pixels, every ad platform has a different type of tracking pixel. What a tracking pixel does is allows you as the media buyer to see if your ad worked. So for example, if I clicked on that Hero Rats ad from the previous slide, I clicked on that and I landed on a landing page and I donated. I need to be able to measure as a media buyer that which ad unit actually triggered that action to happen. That doesn't happen instantaneously. It happens by putting a piece of code on your website that allows you to measure that transaction. The unfortunate issue is that every platform has their own pixels, and if you're using the self-service system, right? If you're using Facebook self-service or Twitter self-service, you're going to have to upload their pixels separately, right? There's other tools out there that allow you to kind of create a larger, more robust tracking pixel, but there comes a lot of integration with that. So we're not going to dive into that on this webinar, but what I want everyone really to understand is that without these tracking pixels in place, there really is no way to effectively measure your media buys back to the ad unit. A lot of it will be assumption. A lot of it will be looking at Google Analytics and seeing that something came from a certain platform, but you're not going to be able to tie that back to a particular ad unit. So definitely encourage everyone before you turn anything live, make sure that your pixels are loaded, but also make sure that they're working. Most platforms do a really good job about being able to tell you within their platform if they're on or not. Essentially, you'll see the little green light, little checkbox that says it's working. So technical setup is really, really key to making sure that you're able to effectively measure any of the media buying you're doing. So the final part of this is, get out there and execute, turn it live. Getting your ad units live, and then, as I mentioned, being able to track and optimize them. It is one of the, there's equal part art, equal part science, in being able to figure out what's going to work best. You have to effectively let some ads run for a bit and get some data. If an ad unit hasn't run yet, I wouldn't pause it, because it may actually be the one that's going to work best. And on a lot of platforms, particularly how Facebook works in their self-service model, is if one ad unit is working really well, they're actually going to keep on serving it, and they're not going to show the other ones, right? So you actually may need to pause an ad that's working really well just to see if the other ones can work better, right? So it's not a perfect science, a little bit of art to it. But at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is understand which platform or which ad unit is working best. And the other thing that I would encourage, particularly for folks who are running campaigns across multiple platforms, is pit them against each other, right? Like, you want to understand if you're running a donation campaign, a direct donation campaign, or a direct lead acquisition campaign. If you're running it across Facebook, Twitter, and Google Display, if one of them is working better than the other one, it goes back to your goal. Your goal was to collect email addresses or to get donations. And if one is working better than another one, you turn the other ones off and you move those budgets over, right? That's the beauty of digital, is that you're able to pause and start and shift things in real time. But it really comes down to being able to track and optimize these in real time. I wouldn't ever suggest just setting something up and coming back when the budget's spent. Always keep an eye on what's going on with your ad placements. All right, so how can your organization leverage this and do this better? So the big takeaways. Short answer, it always depends on your goals and resources. Not a one-size-fits-all model for any organization. Go through this framework, establish goals, understand audience, understand your content resources, understand your financial resources, understand your technical resources, and then go out and figure out the best platform for you, right, for your organization. Be very careful too about benchmarking against other organizations. I know there's a lot of data and a lot of information out there. What we always suggest for every single one of our clients is that if you don't have benchmarks, go establish those yourself, right? It's always good, yes, to do some competitive analysis and trying to understand how effective you're being against your peer organizations, but it's also just as important, always try to beat yourself, right? If you're getting $3 email acquisitions, your goal is to lower it, right? It's not to compete against and to stay on par with what another organization is doing, right? Because you don't know their budgets, you don't know their resources, you don't know their content. Everyone's dealing with kind of a different recipe for media buying. Don't be scared to test things out. Don't be scared to take some risks. Just understand that when you take risks, measure them, right? That's when when something didn't work or when it was a great risk to take. And then finally, as it relates directly to media buying, if you're not using the Google Ad Grant program right now, definitely go and sign up. It's a great program. It's one of those entry-level kind of things we make all of our clients do. It's $10,000 a free month in search advertising, and it's just such a great way, if you're not doing any media buying, to really learn more about it by getting involved hands-on. So go check that program out, the Google Ad Grant program, and I think we've reached the end. Yes, I got through that in 22 minutes. So if there's any more questions,